BigCountryPreps.com. I'm Evan Wren, and this is the Big Country Preps Wednesday night podcast, a weekly look at the area athletic scene, what happened last week and what's going on this week. I'm here with my partner, Dan Youngblood, via Zoom. And tonight, Dan, we're going to forego the guest so that we can take a look at all the playoff pairings that we've got this week. We've got several teams still alive, and we got a lot of scores to go over from last week. So this show tonight will focus strictly on that.
Yeah, and there's plenty to talk about. Obviously, we had a very busy week last week with a lot of teams in action. This week, down to 8 games at the 11-man level, several others at the 6-man level, so a lot to talk about. And some really good games to talk about that happened last week. And I think some interesting matchups this week. So it should be a fun conversation.
And with that, it's time to take a look at this week's pairings and last week's scores. We'll start off with last week's scores, Dan, in the area round. In 6-man, Region 4, 1A, D2. Lorraine over Richland Springs, 52-0. And how about Lorraine? Wow, what a ball club, what a season they're having. And then Cherokee eliminated the Blackwell Hornets. We have to say goodbye to Blackwell. They fall to Cherokee 36-30.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting matchup. You've got Lorraine at 11-1, and like you said, coming off a really impressive win over Richland Springs, which is down a little bit this year, but it's still Richland Springs. And then Cherokee at 11-0. They're going to play 6 p.m. Friday in Miles. One of several really good 6-man matchups. The one thing to remember with the 6-man bracket is they have half as many teams going from each district to the playoffs. So by the time you get to the third round, you're talking about some really, really good matchups, and you'll see that as we go along.
All right, now let's jump up to Region 2, 1A, D2. Last week's scores, Throckmorton still alive with I thought that was a bit of a surprise, knocking off Jayton 30-24, and then Benjamin, as expected, over Newcastle 56-0, both advance.
Yeah, I mean, I think Throckmorton, that's a huge win, obviously. The Jayton program had really kind of found its stride, was playing really well. So to get a hard-fought defensive win over them was a big deal. And then at 9-3, Throckmorton's going to play 11-0 Benjamin this week, 6:30 p.m. Friday in Springtown. And unfortunately, I think that's going to be a tough one for Throckmorton. But to get this far, I think is really impressive. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there.
Nobody has stopped the Rigdon kid yet. For Benjamin, it's kind of tough to see Throckmorton getting that done. It's just been so difficult for everybody to stop him. That's an uphill climb for Throckmorton. That's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, and that Benjamin defense is really tough too, as evidenced by last week's score against a good Newcastle team. So, yeah, Benjamin's playing really well. That's going to be a tough team for anybody in 6-man to beat. I think there are a lot of people that think that they're headed for a state championship.
All right, now we're going to go to Region 3, 1A, D1. We're going to go up to the D1 level in 6-man in the area around last week. We had Gordon over Blum, 52-48. And that was a good Blum team that Gordon eliminated. Gordon has yet to lose, and now they've got a real challenge ahead of them.
They do. You've got undefeated Gordon at 12-0 playing undefeated Abbott at 12-0, 6 p.m. in Heiko. And what a matchup. But like you mentioned, Gordon is coming off the really tight, hard-fought win over Blum. And here's the thing about 6-man is obviously you have a lot of 45-point rule games, even among good teams. But when you get a really good matchup, like we saw with the Throckmorton-Jayton game, with the Gordon-Blum game, it is a really fun game. It is a really fun game when you can get those really competitive games, and Gordon is coming off of one of those types of wins. So we'll see if they can keep their roll going, but obviously a tough matchup when you got an undefeated team ahead of you as well.
All right, moving on to Region 2, 1A, Division 1. Last week's score that we're looking at from last week from our sole survivor, Westbrook over Buena Vista, 48-0. And that sets up a heck of a rematch, Dan, a great rematch.
Yeah, I mean, how about this matchup? You got 11-1 Westbrook versus 11-1 Rankin, a rematch of a great game that was played early this season at 5 p.m. Friday in Robert Lee. And I think there's a lot of anticipation for this one, not only based on what happened the first time they met when it was a really narrow margin, but just these are two really, really good football teams with really high aspirations. So I think the winner of this one feels like they've got a chance to get to Arlington and maybe win a state championship. So
early on in the season when these two met, I mean, how do you pick this game? I mean, it may as well just flip a coin. When they met earlier in the season, Westbrook edged them 59-58. Mm-hmm. So really, just get out a coin, man, and for that one, that's going to be a great ball game. A lot of points scored. Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's another one of those matchups like I was talking about. When you get those types of matchups in six man, where you get the going back and forth trading scores, there it's a lot of fun. So I'm expecting a really fun matchup here. I think there are going to be a lot of people excited about this one, and for good reason.
All right, before we jump up into the 11-man ranks, we want to thank our sponsors, beginning with for the love of the game broadcasting and our old friend Terry Slavens, owner of K-Legs 93.5 FM out of Breckenridge, 97.7 KATX out of Eastland, Classic Country AM 1330 out of Graham, 94.7 FM KWKQ out of Graham, KROO 1430 AM out of Breck, and KWBY 98.5 FM out of Ranger. That is for the love of the game broadcasting. And Rob Durham, sales consultant at Bear Chevrolet Buick Cadillac up in Breckenridge. If you're in the market for a vehicle, new or used, give him a shout. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever want to meet. Call him at 254-559-2266. That's Rob Durham, sales consultant at Bear Chevrolet Buick Cadillac in Breckenridge. All right, now we're going to move up to Region 2, Class 2A D2. In the area around last week, we had to say goodbye to Santo. They fell to Wink 35-19. Albany took care of business despite a rough first half, took care of business, eliminated Munster, and now Wink and Albany advance.
And the Albany at 10-2 will face Wink at 12-0, 5 p.m. Friday in San Angelo. Wink, like you mentioned, coming off a win over a really scrappy Santo team that was out without quarterback Hut Thornton. I was at that game. They had to play Billy Sandoval at quarterback. Really, I think they had about 3 days of practice to get him ready for that position. And then he gets popped with a targeting call in the third quarter, and they're turning to Cash Johnson, a kid who had never played quarterback, and they still managed to lead in the fourth quarter, but Wink did prevail, and that's going to set up a matchup with Albany that should be a lot of fun. I think the Wink Santo game was really a contrasting styles with Santo's flex bone and Wink spread. Albany, I think, obviously more diverse offensively. That could be a really exciting offensive football game.
I think it will be. Wink's an interesting ball club. They have a lot of weapons all over the field. They have good receivers. They have a lot of speed. Big, strong, stout quarterback who can run the football as well. And Albany, when it's healthy, they just play the lights out.
Yeah.
They're just creaming people when they're healthy, and they've got their key weapons back. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, and it seems like
And
Albany
nobody's
is
beaten Wink this year. They're 12-0.
no, they haven't. But it does seem like Albany is really finding its stride and kind of settling into that, late November, early December Denny Faith Albany model and mold. So this is going to be an interesting matchup. And if Albany can get through this one and win by 2 or 3 scores, look out. This Albany team may be
Yeah.
a state title contender.
Start getting that Arlington feeling here very
Yeah.
soon. I'm already kind of getting it when they're playing this well, because that Munster Ball Club was they were young, but they to beat
Yeah,
them 56-10 is pretty impressive.
for sure. So
So,
this is gonna be an interesting one for sure.
all right, and with that, we're going to jump over to Region 2 2A D1. Where we had to say goodbye to 2 of our teams, Dan. Bangs falling to Riesel 38-14, and Crawford eliminating Coleman 34-13. Couple of good ball clubs there that our guys ran into.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously Coleman was right in that game with Crawford for a quarter, and then kind of got away from him there in the second quarter, in some big plays, and it really hurt him. But this was a really good Coleman team. When you look now, their only losses were to a Lano team that's undefeated at a higher classification, a Toller team that's undefeated, and Crawford team
Still
that's
going.
undefeated. And Toller and Crawford will very likely meet for that region championship, or for that region title here in a couple of weeks. So this Coleman team had to bow out in the area round, but when you look at the teams that beat it, it's an elite list of teams. So a really strong season for Coleman, and then Bang's a really nice bounce back season for them as well. Obviously, they had to fell to Riesel in their last one, but this was a team that made some serious strides this year as well.
Coach Maxfield. Coach Maxfield over at Bangs inherited a team that 3 years before he got there had put together a combined 2-27 record. And in 5 seasons there, he's gotten them into the playoffs 3 times. So bravo to Coach Maxfield. I think he's kind of quietly done a very good job at a program that was struggling. And somebody needs to commend that guy. He's done some nice work, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and obviously they're going to have some key pieces to replace, particularly Guy Powell, the running back, who is a really big weapon for them, one of the area's leading rushers. But I think that they have laid a strong foundation for what they're building, and I agree. I think you got to give Maxfield a lot of credit for what he's doing there.
All right, we're going to jump over to Region 1 to a D1 where there's a lot of excitement going on. We've got the potential for a rematch between Cisco and Holly that went right down to the wire the first time just a few weeks ago. Last week, we got some scores. Cisco over Stratford, 14-8. Uh, Forcent fell to New Deal, 35-11, and then Holly manhandled Panhandle. I made a rhyme, huh? 72-26. But we are right now, we're in position. If they both take care of business, we could see a rematch. And you want to talk, it was a huge crowd to begin with. Holly put in, 6 decks of portable bleachers to accommodate this crowd. Who knows how big it's going to be this time because that first game, it was just lights out. It was a great game.
For sure. And that sets up a couple of interesting regional semifinals. Cisco at 10-2 will take on New Deal 9-3, 2 p.m. Friday at Colorado City, while Holly, unbeaten at 12-0, will take on 10-2 Sonora, 6 p.m. Friday in Big Spring. I think if you look at those two matchups, you got to feel good about the Cisco and Holly's chances to get through this round. And I agree. If those two meet for a second time for the second straight year, that is going to be a massive, massive matchup for area fans, and really, it's going to have, I think, potentially, state championship game implications. These are two teams with that type of ability. So the first game was such a classic. I mean, I can't imagine there's anybody that doesn't want to see that a rematch of that one.
Well, I was at the first one, and I would like to see a rematch of the first one. I mean, that's probably the best game I've seen this year. I mean, that was one of the best games I've seen in multiple years. It was just an outstanding, exciting ball game. Right now, we're going to jump over to Region 2, 3A, D2, where we had to say goodbye to the Comanche Indians. Comanche finished 10-2 under Coach Jake Escobar, and what a job this guy's done. I mean, he started the program. He took over for Coach Hermersmeyer, who was successful under the with the wing T, but he brought in his own style, changed the playbook, changed the defense, and everybody's like, why are you doing this? It's not broke. Don't fix it. And they did struggle the first year while they're implementing that system, but guess what? They went 10-2 this year. So there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say.
For sure. And I mean, what a job. I mean, it's going to be hard to find, any area coach that's done a better job this year than Coach Escobar did with that particular Comanche team. Like you said, taking them from 1 win last year to 10 wins this year, and an outright district championship, and really a dominant season. They're another team when you look, they lost to Toller, who's still playing. They lost to Bells, who's still playing. Two just outstanding football teams, and beat everyone else. And then you look at just kind of the way they did it. Sawyer Wilkerson, the area's leading rusher, as a sophomore. That kid, learn that name. You're going to be saying it a lot the next 2 years. And then Layden Welch at quarterback, a kid who's had a really big season for him as well. I mean, this has been a really fun story. It's unfortunate that it's come to an end, but I do think that you're going to see some spoils from this season when we start putting together our all big country preps team. There's going to be some players that are going to show up there, I think, for sure.
Comanche's going to be represented there. There's no doubt about it. We're going to run over to Region 1. We're going to stay in 3A D2. We're going to go to Region 1, where we had a couple area round games to keep an eye on. Wall advanced with a rout of a good Childress team, 44-10. And Canadian eliminated early. I thought actually, I mean, the score looks lopsided, but I thought actually early gave a pretty good account of itself considering who they were playing there. I don't think they have anything to be embarrassed about with that loss at all. And early is done. Regional semifinal, we got the Wall Hawks still alive, still rolling.
And at 11-1, Wall will be taking on Idalou at 9-3 at 1 p.m. Friday in Sweetwater. In an interesting game, but I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. This Wall team is really, finding its stride offensively. That running game is really starting to put up some big numbers, and then defensively they've just been unbelievable all season long. And that sets up an interesting matchup this week with Idalou. But I think it sets up potentially a really interesting. Of course, Wall's got to take care of their business, but if they can, it potentially sets up a really interesting region championship game against a Canadian team. And talk about just polar opposites in the way they attack opponents. You'd have the ground and pound flex bone team from Wall versus a Canadian team that's just throwing the ball all over the place. That would be a matchup of a really fun matchup of contrasting styles.
All right, now we're going to jump up to 3AD1. We're going to stay in Region 1, and we had a couple of teams that were still alive in the area around last week, Dan. Jim Ned was one of them. They fell to Bushland, a very good Bushland team. 28-10. Brock advanced with a win over Muleshoe, and that was really, I mean, Muleshoe was just outmanned. That Brock team was just too good for them. They advanced 57-20.
And that sets up a matchup between Brock at 8-4 against Bushland 11-1, 2 p.m. Friday in Vernon. And one thing that's interesting about that bracket on the other side, it's kind of played out exactly how we thought it would. You've got Paradise and Whitesboro, Brock's two district mates, playing in the region semifinals on the other side. So you are there's a very, very good chance we're going to have two teams from District 4-3A Division 1 playing for the district or for the region championship, which is not at all a surprise. Those are three really, really good football teams. Brock played two great games against both Whitesboro and Paradise. So if they can get through Bushland this week, which is a good Bushland team, that's going to be a challenge. But if they can get through Bushland this week, and I expect them to, it would set up a really interesting rematch again with a team from either Paradise or Whitesboro. So that's going to be something to watch for sure.
All right, Dan, we're going to jump up to Class 4A, Region 2, Division 1. And some people were surprised by this, some people weren't. It was just such a tough ball game. Anna eliminates the defending state champs, Stephenville, 33-32. And it was just, by all accounts, a great game.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this was destined to be that type of game. I wasn't sure who was going to win it, but this was an undefeated Anna team against a really good Stephenville team, and it turned out to be a classic. Unfortunately, Stephenville came up on the wrong side of it, but this was a back and forth game, a lot of lead changes, really good offense on both sides of the ball, or both sides of the field, and then unfortunately, Stephenville just came up a little short. They gave up the last touchdown with late in the fourth quarter to lose that one. But the interesting thing about that is obviously this ends Stephenville's season. They weren't, a couple rounds short of their opportunity to defend the state championship they won last year. But the interesting thing about that is this was their seventh one-score game in 12 games, and their fifth decided by 1 or 2 points. They played five games this year decided by 2 points or less, a bunch of those 1-point games. So they had a lot of experience in those situations, and really, I mean, it wasn't a deal. They played well. They just came up 1 point short, and that's kind of been the story of their season. They've had a lot of those types of games this year.
All right, and then we're going to jump over to Region 1 for a D1, where we had a couple of teams that were still alive last week. We still have one. Wichita Falls High eliminated Big Spring 31-7, and Brownwood handled an injury-marred Canyon team that was kind of playing quarterback by committee. I was on hand for that ball game, but they eliminated Canyon 31-10 out of out in Midland, which was cold, wet, damp, windy, awful. It was just absolutely horrible conditions out there. Brownwood advances, and it's turned out that Brownwood has put together the great season that some of us thought they would.
Yeah, no question. I mean, at 10 wins already, heading into the third round of the playoffs, and really have kind of found their identity in that running game with Colin Anderson at the running back position. I call it the quarterback position, and they're playing great defense as well. So there are not a lot of flaws in what Brownwood's doing. They are facing a feisty Wichita Falls High team. This is one of the better teams Wichita Falls High's put on the field in a long time. As evidenced by the 31-7 win they had over Big Spring last week. But that does set up a matchup, as I said, 10-2 Brownwood against 8-4 Wichita Falls High. That is at 7 p.m. Friday at ACU's Wildcat Stadium here in Abilene. Should be an interesting game. I think Brownwood, has the talent edge there, but this is, again, a very scrappy Wichita Falls High team. You're going to have to put them away. It's the team that's not going to go away or go down easily.
All right, now we're going to jump up to Class 5A, Division 2. We had a couple of teams that were still alive last week. Wiley was still alive. Cooper was still alive. Wiley stayed alive with just a thrilling win over Colleyville Heritage, 50-40. And we have to say goodbye to the Cooper Cougars. They fall to Grapevine, 38-21. But an interesting matchup ahead for Wiley in the semifinals, Dan.
Yeah, you've got 9-3 Wiley against 10-2 Canutillo in a game that's going to be played at 3 p.m. Saturday. Now it's pushed back a day by expected inclement weather in Fort Stockton. So a big third round matchup there. You got Wiley with their explosive, really multiple offense, and a Canutillo team that really likes to run the football. Should be a fun matchup. But looking back to last week at a game I was on hand for, the score there is deceiving. That 50-40 win over Heritage. Wiley trailed by 10 points with less than 6 minutes left, had just thrown an interception, down 2 scores on fourth down. Things looked really bleak for the Bulldogs. And then the defense goes and gets a fumble, and then quarterback KJ Long does what he does. He leads another huge comeback. They end up scoring with 3 seconds left to go up 43-40 with 3 seconds left, and they add another touchdown at the end on a fumble on the kickoff return with a bunch of laterals and things. But that was Wiley's fourth time this year to put together a go-ahead drive in the final minute of a game. 3 of those during their current win streak. So this team is a really, really scrappy bunch. It has that clutch gene. When things are tight and close late, this team really gets things done. So a big win for them. And then just looking back real quickly to the Cooper game, the score there 38-21 is a little deceiving. It didn't necessarily tell how that game played out. Cooper got off to a really rocky start. They fell down behind 3 scores early, and then battled back in the second half to cut it to 3 in the fourth quarter. They trailed by 3 and had an opportunity to go and take a lead. And then Grapevine put on a couple of touchdowns. So really, I think a strong performance by Cooper to do that, despite turning the ball over 5 times. So, that ends their season, but that was a team that also improved a lot. So it was a good year for both Cooper and Wiley, and Wiley's is continuing here into this week with the Canutillo game.
The last area team that we have that is still alive is a local. Abilene High is still going, and a lot of people would have thought no, they wouldn't be still alive at this point, but here they are, shutting out Red Oak last week, 35-0. And as long as the Eagles would play, the way the Eagles are playing defensively, they're going to have a shot, against any reasonable opponent. They're going to have a shot.
And they got a tough one this week. Abilene High, now 6-6, takes on Burleson Centennial at 11-1. That game is 7:30 p.m. Friday at Arlington's Choctaw Stadium. I'll be out there for that one. But I think the thing that you got to realize about this Abilene High team is that record is really misleading, because it took that team a long time to kind of find its offensive identity. They've had a lot of personnel changes. They're leaning now on a freshman at quarterback, Braden Henry, one of the fastest kids in the state. He was a junior Olympian. You're talking about serious speed. They got kind of the read option game going, in between him and Antoine Rashaw, a really good running game going. All of a sudden, they had over 400 yards against a good Red Oak team. That win, I think a lot of people. I think the Del Valle win in the bi-district round, which Abilene High won 42-14 and led that 42-0. I think that kind of turned some heads, because that was a good Del Valle team. And they turn around and follow that with a 35-0 over a really good Red Oak team as well. They're starting to put together a very impressive playoff resume. And like Coach Mike Fullen said, when you get to this point, the records don't. But the only record that matters is that we're 2-0 in the playoffs and playing good football. So I'm excited about that Centennial game. And I said this last week, that Abilene High team is really dangerous, because the defense has been borderline elite all year long. And now they've kind of finally found their offensive stride and identity. And all of a sudden, you're starting to see a team that's really playing the type of complementary football that Coach Fullen likes to see. And I think this is a team that any team that faces them has to be somewhat concerned about, just because of the things they're capable of doing on both sides of the ball now.
All right, and that pretty well wraps up all of the playoff pairing information that we've got going into this week. And we're going to be scattered to the 4 winds all over the place, going to games. Getting as many of these ball games covered as we possibly can, and we hope to see you on the road. It should be an interesting week, and like we were talking about earlier, we could have as many as 10 or more area teams that survive into December, which is generally the measuring stick that we have. How many teams do we have to survive into December? You can be going with double digits. We're doing pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the mark of an elite season, when you're playing in the 4th round of the playoffs or beyond. And we got an opportunity to send quite a few teams there. So it should be fun. And like you said, we're going to be all over the place this week, from Arlington to Fort Stockton, east to west, and everywhere in between. So it should be a fun week of coverage. Like I said at the outset, a lot of interesting matchups this week. So it's going to be exciting to see how things play out, and what we're talking about this time next week.
All right. Well, it's about time to wrap things up for tonight's Big Country Preps Wednesday night podcast. But before we do that, we want to remind you we've got 3 separate subscription packages here at Big Country Preps. We've got a monthly for $5 a month. We've got a semi-annual 6-month subscription where we knock that price down to $4 a month. And then we've got an annual 12-month subscription where we knock that price down to $3 a month, $36 for a full year of Big Country high school athletic coverage.
And we'd also like to remind you that if you see a photo you like in any one of our galleries, those are available for purchase. We have photo downloads available for $7, as well as some keepsakes and prints. So make sure you check those out. As you scroll through the site, you'll notice pretty quick that we take a lot of photos from these games we're at, something we enjoy doing and something we are very proud of here at BigCountryPreps.com.
all big country, all high school, all the time. Welcome home.